Growth hormone is produced by the anterior pituitary gland, and another name for growth hormone is somatotropin, because it causes the cells in our body to divide and grow, to stimulate growth. So when we increase in height and weight and we grow from a baby to an adult, growth hormone helps in dividing the cells. Okay, so it has a very direct impact on metabolism and promoting division and growth in the cells. So there are two hormones that regulate growth hormone. The first one is a growth hormone releasing hormone. Now this is a releasing hormone, correct? So if you remember that hypothalamus produces a lot of regulatory hormones. So the growth hormone releasing hormones actually produced by the hypothalamus, and this in turn stimulates the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. Okay. Now when we don't need growth hormone, we need to stop the production of growth hormone. So this works by negative feedback mechanism, and another hormone known as somatostatin. Statin comes from the word static, or to inhibit. Alright, so somatostatin is the hormone secreted by the hypothalamus to inhibit the release of growth hormone by the anterior pituitary gland. So when we need growth hormone in the body, the hypothalamus produces growth hormone releasing hormone, and it stimulates the anterior pituitary to release growth hormone. Okay, anterior pituitary releases growth hormone into the bloodstream, and the growth hormone has three major functions. The first function is that of a glucose sparing effect. It's called the glucose sparing effect because this hormone encourages the cell to use lipids instead of glucose. So as a result, we end up having a higher blood glucose level, okay, in the blood, because it promotes the cell to use lipids instead of glucose. That's why we call it a glucose sparing effect or an anti-insulin effect. Okay, so in the presence of growth hormone, cells take up more fatty acids and amino acids instead of glucose. All right, so the other function of this hormone is to enhance amino acid uptake and to increase cell proliferation. Okay, so it promotes the division of cell in the presence of a growth factor known as IGF-1. Okay, this IGF-1 is synthesized or released by the liver. Okay, don't worry about that, but the first function is a glucose sparing effect, so it increases blood glucose, and then it increases the uptake of amino acids from the blood. All right, so because it prevents uptake of glucose by the cells, we end up having excessive glucose if you have very high levels of growth hormone. This is called a diabetogenic effect. Okay, and the diabetogenic effect is also a result of conversion of glycogen to glucose from the liver. So the liver stores glycogen, which is a form of glucose, and growth hormone stimulates the liver to release glucose by converting glycogen into glucose. Okay, so this leads to increase in blood glucose levels. Okay, so we call it a diabetogenic effect. All right, so when our blood glucose levels are really high, the hypothalamus releases somatostatin, which is the growth hormone inhibiting hormone, to inhibit the release of growth hormone from the anterior pituitary. So anywhere if you see a negative sign like this, that means a process is being inhibited. Okay? Oops. So most feedback mechanisms in the body are negative feedback mechanism on a day-to-day basis. So growth hormone has a great effect on metabolism and the glucose levels in the body because it has a glucose sparing effect, right? So when we have hypoglycemia, hypo means low sugar or low glucose in the body. The hypothalamus releases growth hormone releasing hormone that stimulates the anterior pituitary to release human growth hormone. Okay, and in turn this causes the release of growth factors that speed up the breakdown of glycogen in the liver. Glycogen is converted to glucose and released into the bloodstream, and the blood glucose raises to normal. Okay. All right. So when we have hyperglycemia, hyper means above. Glycemia is sugar. When we have high blood glucose concentration, the hypothalamus releases growth hormone inhibiting hormone that inhibits the secretion of human growth hormone. Okay. And this in turn prevents the release of glucose from the liver and until the blood glucose falls back to normal. So this is called a negative feedback mechanism. So some structural abnormalities that are associated with growth hormone are called gigantism, which you probably heard of, and acromegaly, and dwarfism. Now, hypersecretion causes gigantism and acromegaly. In children, hypersecretion, keep in mind, hyper means too much secretion, hyper means above. Hypersecretion causes gigantism in children because the growth hormone specifically targets active epiphyseal plates in children. If you don't remember what epiphyseal plate is, make sure you go back and look at this term. So epiphyseal plate is the region along which long bones continue to divide. Okay, so epiphyseal plate is targeted by the growth hormone, and in children over time they can reach up to height of 8 feet due to excessive secretion of growth hormone. But in adults, the epiphyseal plates have already fused in most of the bones of the hand and feet and hands and legs, right? So if the epiphyseal plates have already closed, excessive growth hormone causes the bones of the hands, feet, and face to grow, whereas other bones of the body remain normal. Okay, so the person ends up having a long torso, but really short, stubby hands and legs. Okay, so this is called acromegaly in adults and gigantism when it affects children. Now, hyposecretion is low secretion of growth hormone. Hyposecretion of growth hormone slows the growth of long bones in children, which causes pituitary dwarfism, okay, in which the person remains a dwarf.